Think the 1970s destroyed muscle cars? Let's test that with a stopwatch. Today we're counting down the top 25 fastest muscle cars of the 1970s using real period road test numbers, quarter-mile times, trap speeds, and the combos that actually delivered. As we go, tell me in the comments, which car do you think takes number one? Before we get there, let's get into it. Number 25, 1972 AMC Javelin AMX. The 1972 AMC Javelin AMX is one of those cars that looks like it should run low 14s all day long. Hood, tight, fastback shape, and that Trans Am credibility until the stopwatch reminds you what the early 70s really did to muscle. The headline option was AMC's 401 cubic inch V, 8 in the Go package, and in net ratings, it was listed at 255 horsepower, tuned to survive new emissions rules and lower octane fuel without grenading itself. Pair that with the common shift command 3-speed automatic and highway friendly gearing, and the personality becomes clear: huge torque, smooth shove, and speed that builds hard once it's rolling rather than a tire melting launch. In period testing, a 1972 401 automatic, AMX has been recorded at about 8.3 seconds to 60 miles per hour and around 16.1 seconds in the quarter mile at roughly 89.5 miles per hour, quick enough to feel muscular, but slower than the legends from just a year or two earlier. That's what makes it underrated. It's less drag strip hero and more high-speed bruiser. A big engine pony car that still sounds serious, pulls confidently on the highway, and proves AMC was fighting to keep real performance alive even as the decade tightened the screws. Number 24, 1970 Pontiac GTO. The 1970 Pontiac GTO sits right on the edge of the muscle car peak. Still loud, still torquey, but already feeling the pressure of rising weight, insurance, and tightening rules. The standard formula was Pontiac's 400 cubic inch V8, but the attention grabber was the optional 455. In factory trim, the 455 with a 4-barrel was rated at 360 horsepower, and what people really felt was the mountain of torque. Figures as high as 5 to 100 pound-feet were part of the GTO's reputation for effortless shove instead of high RPM drama. In real-world magazine testing, that big engine punch didn't always translate into record runs, mostly because many test cars were loaded with options and carried serious curb weight. One well-known road test of a heavily optioned 455 4-speed GTO recorded about 6.6 seconds to 60 miles per hour, and a 15.0 second quarter mile at roughly 96.5 miles per hour. So, the 1970 GTO's speed story is classic Pontiac. It might not always look like the fastest on a perfect drag strip day, but on the street it feels brutally strong, like it can roll on from any speed in any gear and still surge past traffic with that deep, heavy V8 confidence. Number 23. 1971 Dodge Demon 340. The 1971 Dodge Demon 340 is proof that the muscle era didn't just end, it fought back with lighter, sharper cars that could still put real numbers on the board. Under the hood sat Chrysler's 340 cubic inch V8, topped with a 4-barrel carb, factory rated around 275 horsepower with roughly 340 pound-feet of torque. And it loved to pull hard in the mid-range. The exact place you live during real street driving. What made the Demon feel quicker than its size was the combination relatively compact A body weight, serious gearing when optioned right, and enough torque to snap the rear tires loose if you got greedy. In period drag strip testing, Carcraft ran a stock 4-speed Demon 340 with 3.91 gears to about 14.41 seconds at 98.69 miles per hour, which is legitimately fast for the early 70s on street tires. Depending on the magazine conditions and setup, you'll also see street test figures like roughly 7.8 seconds to 60 and a mid-14 second quarter mile around the mid-90 mile per hour range, which lines up with the idea that traction and gearing often decided how wild the launch looked. Bottom line, the Demon 340 wasn't just a cool name, it was a genuinely quick, budget-friendly bruiser that could embarrass bigger badges when the light turned green. Number 22, 1970 Plymouth Duster 340. The 1970 Plymouth Duster 340 is the definition of budget muscle that didn't feel like a budget. It took a compact A-body coupe and dropped in Chrysler's legendary 340 cubic inch LA V8, a high compression, high flow, small block built to rev harder than most big inch bruisers. In factory form, it was rated at 275 horsepower, and the hardware matched the attitude. A performance cam, big valve heads, a 4-barrel Carter carb, dual exhaust, and heavy-duty underpinnings that basically admitted Plymouth expected you to drive it like you stole it. And it wasn't just hype, this thing could genuinely move. In period testing referenced by Dodge's own Heritage write-up, Car Life recorded the Duster 340 running 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6.2 seconds, then charging through the quarter mile in 14.72 seconds at roughly 94.24 miles per hour. That speed came from a perfect muscle car cheat code, a relatively light body, a punchy engine that made real mid-range torque, and gearing that let it leap forward the moment you crack the throttle. The result is a 70s icon that feels quick, even today, sharp, loud, and always one good launch away from embarrassing a bigger name. Number 21, 1971 Mustang Mach 1. The 1971 Mustang Mach 1 is where the Mustang got bigger, meaner, and more heavyweight bruiser than lightweight street racer. It still looked like pure muscle car theater, shaker-style attitude, long hood, and that aggressive stance, but the real story is what you ordered under the hood. Most Mach 1s left the factory with a 351 Cleveland V8 in various tunes, but the headline grabber was the optional 429 Cobra jet, a big block built to deliver effortless torque and high-speed pull. In period testing, the Mach 1 with the 429 Cobra jet showed how the 70s changed the game. It was strong, but weight and traction made it more of a rolling hammer than a perfect launch drag car. A Motor Trend test recorded 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6.4 seconds and a quarter mile in about 14.7 seconds. And they noted the test car used an automatic, which didn't help off the line. So the Mach 1 speed is the kind you feel in the middle of the tack, deep-throated V, 8 surge, big torque on demand, and that unmistakable sensation that it's built to eat highways, not just win one clean stoplight sprint. Number 20, 1970 Mercury Cyclone Spoiler GT. The 1970 Mercury Cyclone Spoiler GT is one of the most secretly serious muscle cars of the era, built with NASCAR-flavored attitude, then disguised under Mercury's smoother, less shouty brand image. Under the hood, the Spoiler GT was all business. Ford's 429 cubic inch V8 in Cobra jet form, and in many trims, the performance story revolved around ram air induction and heavy-duty drivetrain parts meant to survive full throttle abuse. Depending on exact configuration, period specs commonly cite the 429 Cobra jet around the high 300s horsepower SAE gross range, with a tidal wave of torque that made the car feel strong even when it wasn't revving hard. What makes the Cyclone's speed so impressive is that it could run like a true top-tier muscle car despite being a big, heavy coupe. In a well-known Motor Trend performance reference tied to the same drivetrain family, you'll see 0 to 60 miles per hour in 5.8 seconds and a 13.99 second quarter mile at 1 miles per hour, numbers that put it right in the real fastest of the 70s conversation. On the street, it's less about a flashy launch and more about relentless pull. Once the 429 gets into its torque band, the Cyclone surges forward like it's being yanked by a cable. Number 19, 1970 Ford Torino Cobra. The 1970 Ford Torino Cobra is what happens when a full-size looking intermediate decides it wants to brawl with the era's biggest legends. Even in a decade where weight was creeping up, the Cobra was Ford's no-excuses performance trim, and the heart of it was the 429 cubic inch V8. In Cobra jet form, it was rated at 370 horsepower with ram air available, and if you stepped up to the Super Cobra jet, Ford basically built it for people who measured weekends in quarter miles. The speed story depends on which Cobra you're talking about. A Motor Trend test of a Torino Cobra with the 429 Cobra Jet, automatic, and 3.50 gearing recorded 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6.0 seconds, with the quarter mile in about 14.5 seconds at around 1 to 100 miles per hour. Already quick for something this big. But the headline run is the nastier setup. A Super Cobra jet car with a 4-speed and 3.91 gears, which Motor Trend recorded at about 5.8 seconds to 60 and 13.99 seconds in the quarter mile at about 101 miles per hour. On the street, it feels like a freight train with a throttle. Less about screaming revs, more about brutal, relentless pull. Number 18, AMC Rebel Machine. The AMC Rebel Machine was American Motors' loud, patriotic middle finger to anyone who thought the muscle era belonged only to the big three. Built for 1970 as a one-year headline grabber, it took the otherwise sensible Rebel and turned it into a factory street brawler with real hardware behind the stripes. Under the hood sat AMC's 390 cubic inch V8, fed by a 4-barrel carb and rated at 340 horsepower. With a massive 430 pound-feet of torque, the kind of output that doesn't beg you to rev it, it just shoves. Speed-wise, the machine backed up the marketing. Period performance figures tied to a Motor Trend test list, 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6.4 seconds and a quarter mile in about 14.4 seconds at roughly 99 miles per hour, which is seriously quick for a full-size 4-passenger car on era-correct tires. What makes it special isn't just the numbers, it's how it delivers them. The machine feels like it's always in the torque band, surging forward the moment you roll into the throttle, with that classic big cube V8 punch that turns a casual highway pass into a statement. It's not a delicate, high-strung racer, it's a blunt instrument that happens to be fast. Number 17, 1970 Plymouth Barracuda. The 1970 Plymouth Barracuda, especially in Cuda 446 barrel form, was Mopar's perfect cheat code. Take the brand new E-body shape, keep it relatively compact, then stuff it with an engine that felt like it belonged in something larger and meaner. The star was the 440 cubic inch wedge V8 topped with 3 2-barrel Holley carburetors, the setup Plymouth called 6-barrel. Factory ratings for this package were a stout 390 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque, which explains why the car doesn't need high RPM drama to feel fast, it just surges the instant you lean on the throttle. And the stopwatch backed up the attitude. In a Motor Trend test from May 1970, a 446 barrel Cuda hardtop with a 4-speed and 3.54 rear gears ripped off 0 to 60 miles per hour in 5.9 seconds and a 14.4 second quarter mile at 100 miles per hour. Numbers that still sound serious today, let alone in the early 70s on street tires. What makes it iconic isn't just the speed, it's how it delivers it. Big torque, a heavy punch in the mid-range, and that slightly wild feeling that traction is always the limiting factor. It's muscle in its purest form. Simple, loud, and brutally effective. Number 16, 1970 Torino GT. The 1970 Ford Torino GT is one of those sleepers that looks more like a stylish personal coupe than a pure drag strip bully, until you spec it correctly. The GT was the sporty upscale Torino, and unlike the more stripped down Cobra, it could be ordered with serious hardware while still feeling nicer inside. The key option was Ford's 429 Cobra Jet V8, often paired with Ram air induction through the shaker-style scoop, turning the GT into a big-bodied muscle car that hit hard in the mid-range and kept pulling at speed. What makes the Torino GT memorable is that it was quick in real magazine testing, not just in bench racing. Motor Trend tested a Torino GT sports roof with the 429 Cobra Jet, 3-speed automatic, and 3.50 rear gears, and recorded 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.0 seconds, then a 14.4 second quarter mile at 100.2 miles per hour. Those numbers explain the vibe, It's not a lightweight jumper off the line. It's a high-speed bruiser, stable, torquey, and confident once it hooks up. In other words, the Torino GT is the kind of 70s muscle car that wins by being deceptively fast and by making the other driver underestimate it first. Number 15, 1971 AMC Javelin AMX. The 1971 AMC Javelin AMX is where AMC's pony car stops being an underdog story and starts feeling like a genuine threat. The styling already had that low, wide Trans Am attitude, but the real punch came from the optional 401 cubic inch V8, the biggest engine AMC ever stuffed into the Javelin from the factory. In Go package form, the 401 was typically quoted around 330 gross horsepower with big block style torque, and that's the key. It wasn't a high-strung screamer. It was a mid-range hammer that made the car feel fast in normal driving, not just at redline. Speed-wise, a properly optioned Javelin AMX could absolutely hang with the era's big names. In period testing, you'll find the 401 AMX running roughly 0 to 60 in the low 7-second range, with the quarter-mile landing in the mid-14-second range at close to about 99 miles per hour in good conditions. Those numbers mattered because the Javelin wasn't just quick for an AMC, it was quick, period, especially when traction was always the limiting factor on 70 street tires. What makes it memorable is how it delivers the speed. A deep V, 8 rumble, instant torque when you roll into the throttle, and a confident, high-speed pull that feels more like a fast highway bruiser than a delicate drag strip special. Number 14, 1970 Dodge Challenger TA. The 1970 Dodge Challenger TA is one of the coolest, built for racing, sold for the street muscle cars of the decade, created so Dodge could homologate its Trans Am effort. Instead of a big block, the TA went with a high-winding small block, the 346-pack engine code E55, using 3 two-barrel carburetors on an aluminum intake, a 10.5-to-1 compression ratio, and factory ratings of 290 horsepower at 5 to 1,000 RPM, with 345 pound-feet of torque at 3,400 RPM, numbers that many enthusiasts have long considered conservative for how strong these cars feel in real driving. What makes the TA special isn't just the engine, but the whole personality. The matte black fiberglass hood with that massive scoop, the side exit exhaust style attitude, and the way it was tuned to feel alive and responsive rather than just heavy and brutal. Straight line speed was absolutely part of the package too. Car and driver noted that the mechanically similar AAR Cuda, which shared the same basic Trans Am inspired 346-pack setup, ran a 14.3 second quarter mile at 100 miles per hour, which gives a very realistic picture of what a healthy, well-driven TA could do on period tires. In other words, the Challenger TA is muscle that thinks like a road racer, but still hits hard enough to earn its stripes on the strip. Number 13, 1970 Camaro Z28. The 1970 Camaro Z28 is the moment the Camaro stopped pretending to be a nice sporty coupe and leaned hard into being a street-legal race car with manners. The heart of it was the famous LT1 350 cubic inch V8, a high-compression small block built to rev and survive abuse. In factory trim, it was rated at 360 horsepower and about 380 pound-feet of torque, and the way it delivered that power is what made it special. More punch up top, more willingness to spin, and more keep your foot in it attitude than most big torque bruisers. Speed-wise, it absolutely earned its reputation. In a period-style road test reprinted by Car and Driver, a 1970 Z28 laid down a 14.2 second quarter mile at 100.3 miles per hour, which is serious performance for the era on street tires. What's cool is how it feels fast. The Z28 doesn't just shove, it builds, snarls, and pulls harder the more you lean on it, like it's happiest living near the top of the tack. That combo of real straight line speed and a rev-happy engine is why the 1970 Z28 sits in that sweet spot. Classic muscle car aggression, but with a sharper, more athletic edge. Number 12, 1970 Plymouth Roadrunner 446 barrel. The 1970 Plymouth Roadrunner 446 barrel is the purest version of the muscle car idea. Take a no-nonsense body, give it a serious big block, and let the stopwatch do the bragging. The star of the show is the E87 446 barrel engine, Chrysler's RB Series 440 cubic inch V8 topped with 3 2-barrel carburetors. In factory form, it was rated at 390 horsepower at 4,700 RPM and a massive 490 pound-feet of torque at 3,200 RPM, which explains why it feels so violent in normal street driving. You don't have to wind it out, you just roll into the throttle and it surges. And it wasn't just a great story, it was genuinely quick. A period track test referenced by Hemmings shows a Roadrunner 446 barrel running the quarter mile in 14.06 seconds at 101.69 miles per hour, which is solidly in fastest of the era territory on street tires. Another Hemmings piece cites the same Motor Trend test and also lists 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6.6 seconds, showing how hard it hit even before the top end really came alive. The best part is the personality. It's not delicate or refined, it's a loud, torque-heavy bruiser that turns every straight road into a dare. Number 11, 1970 HEMI Cuda. The 1970 HEMI Cuda is muscle car mythology that actually shows up on a stopwatch. At the center of it is Chrysler's 426 cubic inch Street HEMI V8, fed by dual 4-barrel carburetors and factory rated at 425 horsepower with 490 pound-feet of torque, the kind of output that doesn't build, it just hits. You could order it with a 4-speed manual or a 3-speed torque flight automatic. And either way, the personality was the same: brutal mid-range pull, a hard charge on the top end, and an engine sound that makes everything else feel a little less serious. What's wild is that the car's biggest enemy wasn't power, it was traction. In Motor Trend's May 1970 instrumented testing of a HEMI Cuda coupe, it hit 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 5.8 seconds and ran the quarter mile in about 14.0 seconds at roughly 102 miles per hour, with testers noting how difficult it was to get all that torque to the pavement on stock era tires. That's why the HEMI Cuda's speed feels almost caged. Give it grip and it's terrifying, but even stock, it was quick enough to define the upper ceiling of what early 70s street muscle could be. Number 10, 1970 Torino Cobra. The 1970 Ford Torino Cobra is one of the best examples of big car, big punch from the peak muscle years. It didn't rely on fancy tricks, just a serious big block and the kind of torque that makes the nose lift even with street tires. The core engine family was Ford's 429 V8. In Cobra form, you could get the 429 Cobra Jet, and Ford also offered a ram air setup that fed the engine cooler outside air through the hood scoop, turning the Cobra into a real highway bruiser with strong top-end pull. And the Torino's speed numbers proved it wasn't just a loud badge. Motor Trend tested a Torino Cobra with the Ram Air 429 Cobra Jet, a C6 automatic, and 3.50 rear gearing, and recorded 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.0 seconds and a 14.5 second quarter mile at 100 miles per hour, fast for something this large and especially impressive on period tires. Step up to the nastier combination, a 429 Super Cobra Jet with a 4-speed and 3.91 gears, and the same source reports 0 to 60 miles per hour in 5.8 seconds and a 13.99 second quarter mile at 101 miles per hour. So the Torino Cobra's real personality is simple, not a delicate sprinter, but a heavy-hitting muscle car that builds speed brutally and keeps pulling hard once it's moving. Number 9, 1971 Mustang Boss 351. The 1971 Mustang Boss 351 is the late surprise of the muscle era because it's a small block car that runs like it's hiding a big block. At the center is the 351 Cleveland in Boss trim, a high output setup with aggressive breathing and serious internals, rated at 330 horsepower at 5,400 RPM and 370 pound-feet of torque at 4 to 1,000 RPM. It wasn't just a badge package either. Period summaries highlight the Boss's drag-friendly hardware like a wide ratio, 4-speed, 3.91 traction lock rear, and ram air induction as part of the overall formula. And the speed numbers are why enthusiasts still argue this might be the best Boss to actually drive fast. Motor Trend recorded 0 to 60 miles per hour in 5.8 seconds and a 13.8 second quarter mile at 104 miles per hour, which is outright quick for the early 70s. Car and Driver also tested it at 5.8 to 60 with a 14.1 second quarter mile at 100.6 miles per hour and a top speed around 117 miles per hour redline limited. What makes the Boss 351 special is the feel. It doesn't just shove on torque, it pulls harder the more you lean on it, like a road race engine that just happens to be drag strip fast. Number 8. 1970 Dodge Challenger RT 446 pack. The 1970 Dodge Challenger RT 446 pack is one of those cars that feels like it was built to settle arguments. The engine is the whole legend Chrysler's 440 cubic inch RB V8 topped with 3 two-barrel carburetors, the famous 6-pack, also called 6-barrel. In factory tune, it was rated at 390 horsepower at 4,700 RPM and a massive 490 pound-feet of torque at 3,200 RPM, which explains why it doesn't need big revs to feel violent. Speed-wise, the RT 446 pack sits in that rare group of 70s cars that were fast both on paper and on the clock. Hagerty's performance summary cites 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6.2 seconds and a 13.7 second quarter mile at 105 miles per hour for the RT 446 pack combo, numbers that put it right alongside the era's most feared street machines. What makes it memorable isn't just the time slip, it's the way it gets there. The throttle response feels aggressive, the mid-range pull is endless, and once it hooks up, it surges forward like the whole car just got lighter. It's classic Mopar muscle, less finesse, more force, and exactly why the 6-pack cars still get treated like a separate species. Number 7. 1970 Plymouth GTX. The 1970 Plymouth GTX was muscle car power, dressed up like a gentleman, more upscale than a Roadrunner, but absolutely capable of throwing down when you spec'd it right. From the factory, Plymouth made the decision easy. The standard engine was the Super Commando 440 cubic inch V, 8 rated at 375 horsepower, with 2 iconic upgrades available, the 446 barrel rated at 390 horsepower and the optional 426 Street HEMI at 425 horsepower. On the street, the GTX's speed came from torque more than drama. The big block 440 pulls hard without needing huge RPM, and the 6-barrel setup adds that extra snap when the carbs open and the engine starts breathing like a race motor. For a sense of what the 446 barrel package could do in period-style testing, Hemming cites instrumented results of 0 to 60 in about 6.6 seconds and a 14.06 second quarter mile at about 101.69 miles per hour from a Motor Trend test using that same powertrain. Compiled performance listings for a 1970 GTX 446 barrel 4-speed commonly land in the high 13-second quarter-mile range as well, depending on gearing and traction. That's the GTX vibe in one line, comfort and class, until the throttle turns it into a hammer. Number 6. 1970 Dodge Super Bee. The 1970 Dodge Super Bee was Dodge's budget bruiser idea done the right way. Strip the fluff, keep the heavy-duty parts, and build a car that cared more about time slips than comfort. In 1970, it even got the famous Bumblebee wings front bumper, but the real sting was under the hood, especially if you checked the right box. The standout engine was the 446 pack, a 440 cubic inch wedge V, 8 breathing through 3 two-barrel carburetors. Factory ratings are commonly listed at 390 horsepower and a HEMI matching 490 pound-feet of torque, which explains why it feels so effortless once it's moving. Roll into the throttle and it just surges like the car is being shoved from behind. If you didn't go six-pack, the Super B could also be had with the 383 Magnum, and a limited number were ordered with the 426 HEMI for the ultimate flex. And the speed? That's where the Super B earns its reputation. In a period-style review recap, testers praised its strip manners, listing quarter-mile runs in the 13.7 to 13.8 second range at roughly 101 to 102.5 miles per hour, numbers that put it right in the top tier of the era. Number 5, 1970 Plymouth Cuda 446 barrel. The 1970 Plymouth Cuda 446 barrel is one of the most perfectly balanced, fast on the street, fast on the strip muscle cars ever sold. It takes the lighter, tighter E-body Cuda and pairs it with Chrysler's RB Series 440 cubic inch V8 topped with 3 2-barrel Holley carburetors, the famous 6-barrel setup. In factory tune, this package was rated at 390 horsepower at 4,700 RPM and a massive 490 pound-feet of torque at 3,200 RPM, which is why the car feels so violent even without chasing high RPM. Speed-wise, the 6-barrel Cuda wasn't just quick for the day, it was legitimately elite. Dodge's Heritage Performance discussion notes that stock tests for the 446-barrel Cuda landed in the mid-13-second range, commonly quoted around 13.65 to 13.72 seconds in the quarter mile. That's the kind of time that puts it shoulder to shoulder with the most feared big block cars of the era, even before you start talking about tuning or modern tires. What really defines the Cuda is how it delivers that speed, instant torque, a hard mid-range punch, and that classic Mopar sensation that traction is always the limiting factor. When the carbs open and the engine starts gulping air, it doesn't feel like it accelerates, it feels like it lunges. Number 4, 1973 Pontiac Trans Am Super Duty 455. The 1973 Pontiac Trans Am Super Duty 455 is the ultimate 70s plot twist. Right when muscle cars were supposed to be fading out, Pontiac quietly dropped a factory package that still ran like the early glory days. The magic is the SD-455 itself, an all-business version of Pontiac's big V8, built with race-bred strength in mind, including a reinforced 4-bolt main block and other heavy-duty internal upgrades that made it far tougher than a regular production. 455. Official ratings get debated because the SD was widely considered underrated, and some sources even call the published figure likely made up, but the point is simple: the car performed like a monster for the era. In period-style results, Hot Rod reported a best quarter mile of 13.54 seconds at 104.29 miles per hour, which is absurdly quick for a fully streetable 1973 car. Hemmings also cites car and driver numbers showing 0 to 60 in about 5.4 seconds for an SD-455 Trans Am configuration, reinforcing that it wasn't just fast on the big end, it launched hard, too. What makes it unforgettable is the feel, huge torque, a deep, heavy V8 surge, and the sense that Pontiac built one last real muscle engine, then dared emissions-era reality to stop it. Number 3. 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 450 4LS6. The 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 450 4LS. 6 is the kind of car that didn't just win bench racing arguments, it ended them. This was Chevrolet taking the biggest, baddest version of its Mark IV big block and dropping it into a mid-size body that could actually use the power. The LS6 454 cubic inch V8 was factory rated at 450 horsepower, and the real magic was how serious the hardware was: a 4-bolt main block, high compression, big flow heads, and a Holley carb feeding an aluminum intake, all designed to live at high RPM without flinching. But the Chevelle's reputation comes from the way it translated that spec sheet into speed. In Motor Trend's flashback road test, the best quarter-mile runs were brutally consistent, with a low of 13.44 seconds, followed by more 13.4 and 13.5 passes, proof it wasn't a one-hit wonder. Hot Rod also recounts a 13.44 at 108.17 miles per hour run, which explains why people still talk about the LS6 like it was overpowered on purpose. And that's the whole LS6 Chevelle vibe. Absurd torque you can't fully use on street tires, a violent mid-range punch, and top-end pull that keeps climbing until you run out of road. Number 2. 1970 Buick GS 455 Stage 1. The 1970 Buick GS 455 Stage 1 is the ultimate quiet car that ruins loud cars. It doesn't look like a drag strip bully at first glance, but the drivetrain is pure muscle. The heart of it is Buick's 455 cubic inch V8. And the Stage 1 package was the factory's way of turning that torque-heavy big block into a serious performance weapon, stronger breathing, sharper tuning, and a nastier attitude than the standard GS. In period reporting, the Stage 1 was officially rated at 360 horsepower, while torque was a massive 510 pound-feet, and even the magazines joked that Buick's rating was an understatement record. What makes the GS Stage 1 legendary is that the speed matched the reputation. In Motor Trend's January 1970 testing, the car ripped off 0 to 60 miles per hour in 5.5 seconds and a 13.4 second quarter mile at 105.5 miles per hour, which is straight up top tier for the era. A Motor Trend road test scan also quotes an even more specific pass, 13.3, 8 seconds at 105.50 miles per hour, stock, no excuses, no with mods, just showroom muscle. On the street, it feels exactly like the numbers. Effortless torque, brutal mid-range pull, and the kind of acceleration that makes people underestimate you once, then never again. Number 1. 1970 Dodge Challenger RT 426 HEMI. The 1970 Dodge Challenger RT 426 HEMI is the moment Dodge took its new pony car and gave it an engine that felt like it belonged on a drag strip more than a dealership lot. The centerpiece is the 426 Street HEMI V8, running dual 4-barrel carburetors and officially rated at 425 horsepower with 490 pound-feet of torque. A factory number that already sounds outrageous even before you remember how many people insist it was conservative. What makes the HEMI Challenger special is how it delivers speed. It isn't a peaky, temperamental racer, it's a torque monster that surges hard from low RPM, then keeps pulling like it's allergic to letting off. And despite the era's tire limitations, it could still put down truly top-tier performance. Hagerty's compiled period performance figures credit the 426 HEMI Challenger with 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6.3 seconds and a 13.1 second. Quarter mile at 107.1 miles per hour, which is exactly the kind of time that turns a street car into a legend. The best part is the personality. That heavy, mechanical HEMI sound, the slightly unruly traction, and the feeling that every full throttle run is a small event. It's not just fast for the day, it's the kind of fast that defined the day. And that's our list of the fastest muscle cars of the 1970s, ranked by real, period-correct performance, not just nostalgia. If your favorite didn't land where you expected, drop it in the comments with the exact trim, engine, and test numbers you've got, because the best part of muscle car culture is the receipts. If you enjoyed this countdown, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you want next. Fastest pony cars, quickest big block sleepers, or the most underrated street machines that deserve a comeback. Until then, keep it loud, keep it classic, and I'll see you in the next one.